Welcome, everyone. My name is Giancarlo, and I'm head of events for European Guanxi. I'm very happy to be welcoming you with Eugenie, our head of partnerships. And we're very glad to be presenting today this session with Jean-Joseph Boillot, who's economist and researcher at the Strategic and International Relations Institute. So we're very happy that we have a very interesting topic to discuss today, which is China's role in the new post-COVID geopolitical power order. We will have more time to develop this further on, but for the meantime, I think it's very important that we just start with the basics, that we present to you our association and why we're here today discussing. So this is the agenda, pretty straightforward, I would say. We will have an opening remark, as I just mentioned, by European Guanxi. Then we will let the professor start his presentation for the next 25 to 30 minutes. And then we will have a Q&A session and a moderation session with Eugenie, who will happily provide all of the necessary context to further detail this session. And obviously, we'll have time to ask you guys what are your questions. And then obviously, we will proceed to ending the session in an hour time. So without further ado, let's further go down our presentation. So first of all, who are we? What is European Guanxi? Well, it's a nice question to ask. We have been able to operate thanks to all of you guys. We are a non-profit network of young professionals, scholars, and students, which are all dedicated to advancing understanding and collaboration on EU-China relations. This can be economics, political, social, environmental, and so forth. We have been funded since September of 2020, and we have been expanding all over the place in many different local chapters. At the moment, we're operating 9 of them. So 4 in China and 5 in Europe. And we also have a very extensive ability to cooperate in different sectors. We have more than 500 members, and we operate in different categories like blog articles, podcasts, newsletter. We have an annual journal as well. And obviously, we also do many of the events, including this one. So obviously, we're very happy that you are interested in this topic, and I would propose to just follow down and present our main guest of this session, which is Professor Jean-Joseph Boillot. Thank you very much for being with us today. I will just run through a very quick presentation of yourself, but feel free to add more details if you so wish. So you have an academic background in social sciences with a PhD in economics at the École Normale Supérieure. And you have a very extensive professional experience in different sectors related to economic development with the French Ministry of Finance, with a very strong economic specialty in East and Southeast Asia, the former Soviet Union, and also India. You are also co-chairman of the Euro-India Economic and Business Group. And beyond your daily work, you have been also publishing some recent books entitled China, India, Afrique. So we're very happy to know more about you. And if you could present yourself as well to the audience and then continue on with your own presentation, we will be more than happy to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks a lot. There's no more to say about me, except one thing. As I told you, I started my discovery of China in 1983. I think none of yours were born, no? Why I'm saying this? Because I was at that time, exactly in the position you are today. I mean, in 1983, I used to travel, quite often with my family. So we spent 2 months. And it was, for the first time, possible for a single guy like me and his family to travel freely everywhere in China. Now, at that time, China was a very poor country. And my PhD was the comparison between China and India. And at that time, on average, let's say, the GDP per capita in China was about 20% less than in India. And India was very poor already. And we were shocked by so many image, experience, etc., especially with our friends, because I discovered China through my own network of economists. This was, I think this is always the best. Take the information from inside, not from the newspaper, the media, etc., but from inside. Now, for instance, my best friend in Shanghai, they were living in a house, three families sharing that house in the French part of the city, and they had only one room and a share kitchen and a share bathroom. That was 1983. Now, today, they are getting old like me, but they are still living well, good health, better than mine. And they have three flats, one for them, one for their boy. They have only one boy, not to obey the party. It was in their mind set, and a third one to pay for their rent or the official salary for retired people in China is very small. So having a flat, a good rent, helps you to live. Without that, they would be quite poor still. And you can imagine between 1983 and today, visiting China everywhere, and even I was posted as a diplomat in Hong Kong covering all China, I could see every year the country changing, every year. That amazing change in, let's say, 40, 45 years. Now, most of you are about 25, 30, let's say 30. So you can imagine the next 40 years, there will be a huge change. Not the same kind of change because the takeoff of China during the let's say the 90s, and the technological change from 2010, let's say, are behind us. But the challenges for China in the next 20 to 40, 50 years will be as big as what I've seen myself. So what we need is to look out of the box. And my presentation will try to present you the most fascinating trend for the next 20 to 30 years. We may be wrong, I know, but as an expert, I'm paid not to say, or maybe, or maybe, or maybe. No, I'm paid to say this should happen with, let's say, 50% chance, 70% chance, etc. The scenario I will present to you is about 60% chance, I think. And why I decided to not to talk about China first, but to talk about the world global change, is that because China is not a price maker for the change in the world. China is like everybody, every country, a price taker. China is not powerful enough to change the global change. And even if China is, let's say, the first global economy today, it's still not more than 20% of the global economy. In terms of population, China is less than 12%. So the rest of the world matter a lot, and China will have to adjust and to adapt to that trend. Now, it's important, sorry, and this presentation will be available to everybody, okay? So no need to panic because the slides are quite full of information, okay? Now, I started with that title, New World, New Challenges. And what we have not clearly in mind is that after the COVID, we have entered a new world. Not because of the COVID by itself, the COVID took place in China by accident, let's say. Not really by accident. Yeah? But the new world is now coming. Why? So if you look at the graph, it's amazing. That report published in 1972. Yeah, you were not born. I was just starting my study, and that report was a wonderful grouping of scientists, most of them not economists, but biologists, etc. And they were asked to try to predict or to uh, 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 see or to foresee how the world economy will evolve in the next 50 years. So 72 was before the first oil shock of 74. At that time, one barrel of oil were costing less than $1. Okay, now we are about 100 minimum, and that people were. It's amazing, no? That people were so accurate in the interaction between the population trend, you can see in black, rising till 2030, and after 2030, population decline, isn't it? This is what you can see. And by the way, what matter is the other curve. You have the food per capita, the service per capita growing fast, global pollution, sorry, and the industrial output per capita. Everything was going up except on the top, non-renewable resources. Okay? And pollution also, it's quite important to look in details. Global pollution was on the rise, but not the most extreme rise. Now, let's continue. We are in 2030, let's say, and the story starts. Now, this is just because I'm a professor. I'm supposed to be an academic and to at least be transparent in the way my methodology work. So we can, yes, next, please.
Yes.
Yes. So we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes, okay? And my job is to look at the future. For that, I'm an economist, but I have to take into account also some other factors, and because they are interplaying together. Okay, so now you can see the 5 quickly. You have the socio-demographic box. Then you have on the right the resources box, natural resources, but also including in that environment, pollution, etc. Then you continue on the third, you have technology, which is sciences, but not only sciences. What happened with China, for instance, was not China leading in science, but China leading in the business model used by China to become the factory of the world, isn't it? This is what happened. It was not because of thanks to sciences. Nowadays, things are changing. China is clearly breaking now the scientific challenge with the US, but still, what matters is the business model. On the left, you have economy. Economy is largely a result of what happened in demography, in natural resources, in technology. But even economy has to deal with what is in the center, political power, the nature of power, the institutions, and the challenges. Why? Because in the end, the politicians at home, but also globally, are the one who decide. For sure, the business community has an impact on their decision. But in the end, They are the politicians who decide. And from their decision, the interaction, the feedback effect impact the rest. Okay, now let's go to the first rupture break, and I must insist on that. After the COVID, the world has entered a new era where not only in China, but everywhere in the world, even in Africa, we can see this. The fertility crash is clearly pronounced. Uh, you have on the right, for instance, India. India is very proud because they have overcome the Chinese population, isn't it? Now look at the fertility rate in urban India. It was 4.1, now it is 1.8. And remind you that under 2.1, the population do not grow at all. And if you look at the right, you have Brazil, UK, Australia, US, France, every, even developed countries are under the 2.1. So what does it mean? Next, please. What would be the population in the next decades? We use, and especially for my generation, to say that the global population will reach 12, 13, 15 billion people by 2100. Okay? So this is the dot, line on the top. Now, we are not at all in that scenario. Since the break, and call this post-COVID break, we are on the last curve. It means the population has started actually to decline almost everywhere except Africa. So if you take out Africa, the population, global population is declining. Okay? Now, where we are going to? On that graph, we are coming back to 6 billion people from about 8 to 9 today. Now, my own assessment is not that. According to the best expert I know on demography, we are going to 4 billion people globally. Now, can you imagine the change? No, you cannot. But you must think like this, and especially for China. Can you tell me what will be the population of China in that scenario? Between 6 to 4 billion people, China will go from 1.4 to half a billion, 500 million. Can you imagine China having that huge drop of population? Okay, you tell me, oh, but everybody knows that. No. Nobody seriously have this picture of China with what? Almost no children and about 35-40% of more than 65 years old people? Can you imagine that China? No, we cannot. We still have the image of China, very dynamic country with let's say, generation of 30 to 40 being at the core, isn't it, of the country. And they are the ones who are still making China so powerful. But they are going to sharply age, and the China of tomorrow has nothing to see with the China of today. Next, please. I have to go fast now, don't mind. Next, please.
Yes, can't you see?
Next, yes, we'll forget this because I presented that slide. Huh? So we'll go to the ecological rupture. Now, on ecology, same. Everybody is aware of a change. We call this a climate change, isn't it? And even in China, this has become now the one of the topic commonly shared by the people. But not so much, clearly. We must say that still China and the Chinese are looking at the welfare, the wages, the house, etc. Climate change is there, but not so much. And they are wrong. Why? Because according to the expert I'm working with, we are not going to the plus 2 degree rise in temperature. Minimum rise would be +4, +5 degrees Celsius. And on that graph, you can see the plus 7.6 degree by 2100. So you can say that this is stupid, rubbish. No, I must tell you, frankly, you must have in your mind, you may think with this, the world is going to a huge change in the climate. It's not because only the rise of temperature. No. It's much more about the instability of the climate. You have seen in China nowadays, every 3 months, 4 months, you have this catastrophe everywhere, north, south, east, etc. Now, this year, you may have seen, no? This winter was one of the hottest in China, isn't it? But this is nothing compared to what will happen in the next 10 to 20 years. Does it mean that it will be the end of the world? Not at all. But the challenge is there. And this is the challenge China has to address. And you have seen the Chinese authorities are clearly dealing with this climate challenge, not as much as it should be. Still, the coal is the number one energy in the country. Still, the level of pollution has been reduced a little bit, but not enough. And the anyway, whatever China does in the next 20 years, the rest of the world is there and will impose to China the change. So you can see the temperature is many Chinese cities is now going up to 45, even 50 degrees, isn't it? So you cannot live above 50 degrees. So China has to address that ecological challenge. Next, please. So usually, China believe that the fourth industrial revolution will address and solve all these issues. Demographic change and ecological change. No, it's not that easy. For sure, you have robots now, and everybody knows that the robots will be the workforce of tomorrow in China. But this is not so easy to do it. I travel to Japan quite often. I can see it's not so easy to adapt the robots to a society. Especially the care of the older people is not addressed in a proper way by robots compared to human, isn't it? So, but now, what is clear is that because of the industrial revolution, the world in the next 20 to 50 years will be entirely different from the world we are living in now. We are just at the beginning of the impact of the industrial revolution. We focus mostly on the artificial intelligence. Clearly, there is something very important going on there. But actually, AI is going through all the science and technology, what I call NBIK, nanotechnology, the biotech we have seen, so important for China, the biotech revolution. I is for intelligence artificial, and K is the knowledge. This is what is at stake in the next few decades. And clearly, China has become, in very few years, a leader in that industrial revolution. To what extent it will solve all the challenges of China, I don't know. We don't have the answer. Next, please. Last is the geopolitical change. Behind that three revolution, demography, technology, and ecology, we can see the north-south shift. The old industrial countries are clearly now losing their grip on the world economy, and not only the world economy, but on the world politics. Uh, uh, don't need to go into details, but on the right side, at least I want to show you, it is the world GDP. You can see 2050 compared to 1980, my first trip in China. China in 1980 was about 5% of the global economy. Now, by 2050, even if there will be, for sure, slowdown of the economy, etc., but even by 2% growth, the Chinese economy in red will be about, let's say, 20-25% of the global economy. What I want to tell you is that China will not be uh, uh, the leading force in economy, because you still will have the developed countries, Europe and US, by and large, will be as large as the Chinese GDP. Okay, so China is not in a situation to become the center of the world. It has to be, or she has to deal with the rest of the world. The rest of the world is the South, global South. The rest of the world is Brazil, Russia, what they call BRICS. This is why it's so important for China to have good relation with the global South, but also the rest of the industrialized country, and especially the US. The US is not poised to disappear from the picture. And as you know, the sorry, good. Voila. I have 5 minutes left. The visit of Trump to China on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is clearly a very important visit. This is the first time the two, let's say, global superpower will meet neck to neck and try to find and strike a deal for the next 10 years. They are not dealing with the next 50 years. Don't worry. The politicians have a short term view, and the short term view is about, let's say, for Trump is 2 years, and for Xi Jinping is about 10 years. Okay? But at least that matters a lot, especially in a world where we have so many tensions, and not only in Middle East, but also in new technology, as you know, etc. Last slide, because I have to finish. I will stop at that slide. Politics and geopolitics. Why politics and geopolitics are, by and large, interconnected? You remember maybe in your study that democracy was supposed to be the end of the world. Democracy, the liberal democracy system, was supposed to be achievable by every country, and it was supposed to be the goal, the target, of the rest of the world. And China has resisted that, but not so much to a certain extent, because the idea was we first will develop economy, and then the political change will come. And when they were talking about political change, well, the idea was, by and large, a kind of democracy, isn't it? But this is finished. That story is finished. Why? Because due to that challenges in demography, in ecology, in science, etc., what we are discovering is that the democratic regime is not suitable. Because we need leaders with power, with a vision, and we need leaders to secure the population. This is why on that graph we had the blue color going slowly and slowly everywhere in the world, and now this is the reverse. Clearly, everybody knows that the USA is not anymore the liberal democracy system we used to know, no? Isn't it? There's almost a civil war there. Now look at Europe. The extreme right, the far right party are emerging everywhere. So there is a demand of authoritarian regime. And it's not so easy to understand the impact on the world. By the, let's say, 20 to 30 years, we will have a kind of planet following the, maybe you have read that book, 1984, and the other one is also, it was written in 1937, so long time ago, Brave New World. You may have read that book also. So we are going clearly towards a world where we will have some regime, sometimes with a kind of democratic institution, but the world is clearly marked by the rise of autocracy. And there's a demand from the population. This is why it's not easy for China, because what we know, and this is my last sentence, is that autocracy always lead to instability. China is, if you look at the history of China, you have this dynasty, isn't it? But the dynasty were always corrupted and ended in civil war. That's the history of China. Every 200 to 300 years at that time, but today maybe 50 years, no more, you have a kind of regime who is corrupted. And you have seen that in China, corruption is considered as problem number one. Why? Because when you have autocrat, you have people who are no check and balance above them, isn't it? And the trend naturally is to introduce corruption as a kind of, for an economist, the corruption is a market, okay? Is a market between the elite and the people. And within the elite is a market between the substrat and the other regime. So the world is having a future for the next 20 years. It's only that. We will see after. But marked by instability, uncertainty, and China itself. Some of you live in China, and you can see that there's a uncertainty about the future, how we will live. You have seen, for instance, the delivery population. No, it's a few million now, with the scooter, etc., delivering food and everything. No, and this class of people is revolting now. is rebel. Why? Because they have very little salary, isn't it? So the challenge is for everybody, except that for China, we have a very specific situation where this economy is still growing and now becoming a super economic power, largely at par with the US. My own estimate is that they are above the US in about 4 to 5 leading sectors, but they have internal challenges, which is the population, the climate change, the adaptation of the new technology society, and last not least, the political regime. And last not least, also, the geopolitical fight with the old industrialized country. We are not ready to let China take the lead in the rest of the world. So that we are not leading to a bipolar world, but the bipolar fight is there, and China is clearly on the side of the only power able to counterbalance the industrial countries. So I hope it was clear in my speech that you are lucky to be the generation where you have to build up your own future. Nothing is already in the pipeline. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this very clever presentation. Maybe now we can turn to the audience and see if some of our listeners have questions. Really, do not hesitate to ask the professor anything you might want to know and dive deeper into.
Maybe waiting for questions, Eugenie, you can start the first one.
Eugenie, Eugenie,
Yeah.
you can start. Please. Pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I have a few questions a bit more China centered. Thank you for your expose on the global world ruptures. But you were talking about China becoming a global power, slowly like going over the US. And I was wondering if, in your opinion, China can become more than just a commercial or economic power? Can it be also influential a bit more broadly? Can it be like a soft power like the US once or sort of still is with the American dream and that sort of thing? Can we see a rise of the Chinese dream, for example?
Yeah, because you cannot at that level uh, be an economic power only. That is clear. You cannot be an economic power if you are not a military power, if you are not a political power, if you are not a scientific power. And this is what we are discovering with China. China has risen to a status of economic superpower, okay? By and large. Let's say, export to the rest of the world, investment to the rest of the world, and let's say the GDP globally, China is a superpower, is even beyond the US clearly nowadays. Okay? And it's not only a question of electrical vehicles, okay? In every sector now. Every sector. Now, if you are not a military power, what happened with China is that as soon as the US decided to stop the delivery of some electronic components, and especially the most advanced components, or if if the US want to prevent China to develop a special program, uh, the US economy will the Chinese economy will disappear. And the story has already happened with Japan. Japan was supposed to be global power number one. You're too young to know that, but they were bestseller books. Japan #1. And it was in 1985, 1990. It's long time ago, maybe. But the fact is, Japan has lost the war. Why? Not the war, sorry, the competition. For two reasons. The first one is that the US obliged the yen to reevaluate in a much, much more bigger scale than was reasonable for Japan. So Japan lost its competitive edge, and the Japanese economy started to decline. Okay. Number two, Japan had no army, no nuclear arms, so the U.S. can impose to Japan any decision it wants. Okay, so the Chinese leaders know very well the experience of Japan, and they are not ready. This is why they don't want the renminbi, the yuan, to be internationalized, because they know that they are not ready to control the level of the yuan. And if the yuan revalues too much, let's say by 30%, this is the end of the Chinese economy locomotive, no? Which is the export of goods, export more and more of kind of services, isn't it? So, to answer your question, I hope I've been clear. There is no way for China to continue to bet on economic rise. It has to rise in military, in politics. Political regime also is very important. If the Western world still continue to impose to China the political change in terms of adopting the liberal democracy system, you can imagine the implosion of China. China is not a country like Switzerland. Liberal democracy can be efficient in Switzerland. I love Switzerland. But Switzerland is 10 million people. China is 1.4 billion people. So China is an empire, and it has to find the political institutions to continue to manage that empire. And it cannot be liberal democracy. It has to be another system. But the West tried to destabilize China and adopt a kind of political regime which is not suitable to China and will lead China to disappear. Thank you for your question, Jenny.
Thank you very much for that thorough answer.
We have some questions from the audience. Do we want to take those?
Yes.
Okay. The first question comes from Davide, and Davide is asking, what would be a serious alternative for Europe instead of looking for strong individual leaders that would further divide it? And what kind of power should Europe aim at to survive in the future new global system?
I don't see any serious alternative for Europe, I must tell you frankly, because I can see the big divide in Europe between the French and the German still being there. And the UK has left, okay? So Europe will still remain a middle kingdom region of the world. So the question for them will be to survive having a kind of, let's say, alliance or a kind of a balanced position between the superpower. This is why the visit of the German chancellor was so important to China. No, he has visited China recently, and this is why the let's say the von der Leyen president has made a huge mistake. There is no way to fight against US and against China. Europe cannot fight against these two superpowers. It has to find a balanced position between the two. Okay? And I say between the two. Madame Leyen made China the systemic enemy of Europe. When you say this, you cannot collaborate with China, isn't it? And so Europe future can be not great. I'm not so optimist, huh? Because of the demography in particular. Because we are not dealing with Europe in terms of demography. But what happened in China is actually happening today in the white Europe. I'm sorry to say white Europe. Okay, and these white Europeans do not accept migrants in large scale who will, let's say, replace or at least provide the workforce needed for Europe. But I'm not also sharply pessimist on Europe, okay? But Europe has to find a compromise between the member states and find this proper balance between the US and China superpower. Not easy, I must tell you, not easy. Depend on you. You have to fight and explain that we don't have to choose between the US and China. We have to deal with these two superpower and to find a good compromise with them. Thank you for the question.
We have the second question from Estelle, who's asking, given demographic decline and increased geopolitical fragmentation, what do you see as the next sustainable engine of Chinese growth over the next 20 to 30 years?
Well, my guess about China growth is clearly what we call a landing. The question is landing from, let's say, 10% at the end of the 20th century, then it goes to 5%. The question is whether it will continue few years about 4 to 5% or sharply decline to 2%. My guess is that it will decline about 2% rate of growth within the next 5 to 10 years. Well, China is trying to continue to push, and the leaders, the Chinese leaders are very smart, very intelligent. They know that to deal with this industrial revolution and to deal with the huge geopolitical challenge, they need to continue to push the growth as much as possible, despite the scarcity of resources now. Okay? Labor, but not only labor, the demand, domestic demand is weak. It's not because the Chinese are not consuming. You live in China, for some of you, you can see, no? The Chinese are consumer number one in the world. But it's not enough to support 5% growth. Now, the Chinese leaders are investing in the future, investing. Some investment are well addressed, some much less, especially when they are building highway in Tibet, where there is no car or trucks going there. But anyway, 80% of this investment are good investment. So my guess is Chinese economy will continue to grow by 4 to 5% till the end of this plan. You have heard about the discussion on the plan. And then sharply will go down to 2%. But 2% will be largely enough. Why? Because the GDP of China is today 80 times more bigger than it was in the past. So 2% of something which is 80 times bigger give you a much bigger increase, incremental GDP every year. So I'm not buying the thesis that China will be trapped in the middle income as it is sometimes presented. I don't see at all China falling in that trap. So 4-5% for the next 5 years, let's say, and then going sharply, I think, to 2%, which would be largely enough.
I would move on. We still have two questions online.
Yes, please.
The third one comes from Paolo. Paolo is asking, given your diplomatic experience in China, could you explain how your on-the-ground observations there influence your analytical lens on China's governance, societal dynamics, and state-society relations?
Well, it's a very good question because as a diplomat, I was supposed to be diplomatic and having only a relation on the top. But as I told you, my and I mean, this is my reputation. I'm a globetrotter of the economy. So I take my bag, it's a backpack, and take my bus, train, and my Chinese language. Even sometimes it's not easy to speak Mandarin in the South, I must tell you. More and more easier, but it was not so easy at that time in the 90s. And what I do is I live with the Chinese people, and we discuss about not serious discussion organized, but about their vision of the future. I believe that a country future depend on its population vision of the future. That's a basic assumption. Uh, for the economist, if there are economists listening to me, it's well known. It's called expectation. Okay, expectation in economy, in economic science, is playing a major role. Expectation can explain inflation. Expectation can explain the intensity of your work, etc., etc. So, my experience is living with the population, discussing about their expectation, which is not easy because you have not a common or unified view of the future, isn't it? But anyway, it gave me that asset to then report to my boss. So I was a diplomat fishing with my net in the local fall, and then trying to synthesize, to sum up, no, my understanding about their vision of the future. My last trip was in 2023. I spent 1 month in China. I'll try as much to travel inside China, but not everywhere, okay? Because 1 month is nothing compared to the size of China. No, so I changed my cities according to the previous visit, and my last report or appreciation was very mixed on the vision of the future of the Chinese people. On one hand, a kind of um, worrying. The Chinese people worry about the future. And that is very important to take into account because the Communist Party, cannot impose its view on the people. If they don't want to have 2 children, they will not have. And Xi Jinping can do nothing for that. Okay, so the expectation of the Chinese people matter a lot. And I was surprised to see between pre-COVID period, I spent 3 months in 2019, just before the COVID. And my last trip in 2023, I could see the difference. The Chinese population is worrying more and more. One reason is the demography, because demography is also having an impact on the society. When you have less children, you have much less energy, isn't it? So this is the way I work, and this is the way I then feed my model to forecast the future. So I'm reasonably optimist on China, but I'm reasonable man, and I do believe that there is no clear, fascinating future for China. The future also is difficult in China.
Thank you
One-
very much for your answer.
Yes, thank you. We have one last question, and then depending on time, we might continue or we will see how it goes. But maybe to conclude from the audience, we have the last question from Julia, who's asking, could Europe position itself as a bigger actor in the global scenario if it's further by a federation process? So it would actually imply to consider the federational status. Yeah.
You are talking about Europe, isn't?
Yes, Europe. Could
Yeah,
Europe position itself as a bigger actor if it was to federalize?
yeah. As I told you, there is no way for federation. I'm not diplomat on that. There is no future. Nobody wants a federation in Europe. Why? Why? Just because there's so much difference. For instance, when you live in Germany, who is able to speak Spanish, or even now French? When I was young, I used to travel to Germany, and most of the German learned French in school, and we could discuss together. Now, yeah, as you have seen, English is the lingua franca in Europe. But there are so many big difference in culture, and last not least, as I told you, Europe is made of middle kingdom, and the middle kingdom are run by middle king or queen anyway, and those politicians are not at all interested in losing their power, because a federation will mean losing my power. Can you imagine Monsieur Macron living in a federation? No. Mr. Macron is dreaming of becoming the head of that federation, isn't it? But and in the same time, Mr. Macron is hated by 2/3 of the Europeans. How can you build a federation on that? So you're right. If we improve the thinking about a proper federation dealing with all this specificity of Europe, historical background, etc., we may find a proper federative future. But how long it will take? It will take minimum 40 to 50 years. Okay, you are all 30 to 35 years old. It means that it's maybe by 2060, 70. Okay, so we have to work today to find the solution of the next 10 years, isn't it? So having in mind a federation, let's say, dream is very good, and we have to work on that. But we have also to understand that what we call a federation for Europe will be something very special, very specific. To a certain extent, for those who live in China, you can see the same challenge. China is not a country by itself. China is not a country by itself. You have, when you are in Shanghai, you can see the Shanghaiese are very proud of their region, isn't it? When you are in the south, in Guangzhou, in Hong Kong, you can see even more that. So the regime in Beijing, the dynasty, the emperor, has to find the balance for China itself. They have found, I think, a kind of solution, the Chinese solution to their differences. As for Europe, we have to find that institutions, that solution, federative solution, and I'm afraid that it will be very difficult, very difficult. We have too much competition between the big middle power, like France, Germany, Spain, for instance, Italy. The Italians are very proud of their past and present situation. Look at Madame Meloni. She's more now popular than Mr. Macron. And, well, she doesn't want a federative Europe where she will be the head of Europe. She wants to still be the head of Italy within a European framework. So I may be wrong, but as I told you, I'm an expert. I'm paid to tell you how I see the topic.
Thank you very much for your answer. Maybe we can see if we have one last question from the audience, and otherwise, I'll be asking you one last question before we end this conference.
Allez, Eugénie, last question.
Last question then from me. Perfect. Well, you were talking about China not being able to be a global power, as for example, the US is, or not for now, and that it has to deal with other um, BRICS powers like India, as you mentioned. Well, in that scenario, is then China only representing its own interests, or is it representing the global south in general when it's proposing a different order? And can we see, for example, China's influence altering the norms or the institutions that have now been dominating the world order, for example, with the UN and other organizations like this?
Yeah, that's a very important question. Thank you. There is a concept in China today which is much discussed, and I was looking for my note on that. It's called Tianxia. Tianxia, Tian the sky, huh? Xia is over the sky. And by chance, Trump and Xi will have a big discussion session in Beijing at the so-called, you may have visited the temple of the sky, of heaven temple. Now, Tianxia means that we all live together under the same sky. So we have the same interest. And China is using that concept to develop a multilateral institution, not to intervene too quickly, like, for instance, in the fight between Iran and US Israel. China position looks a little bit cold, isn't it? It's not fighting as a leader of the global south. Okay? Now, this is a very important concept. In domestic term, you may have read few speeches of Xi Jinping, and the concept of harmony comes very often. We live in a harmony society. So the same will apply for the world. And it is true also that in that multilateral institution, China is more and more active and play that role of the providing finance to the United Nations institutions, etc. But that has a lot of limits. And one limit is China is not an open society. For those who live in China, you will understand clearly what I say. China is not an open society. China is controlling the flows of foreigners coming, living in China. I have one daughter living there. I must tell you that life is not easy always. So, till China remain the the middle kingdom and do not travel much, do not open his eyes, till is China see the competition with the rest of the world, especially the industrial countries, as a threat, till he develop the military response, because China is investing a lot today in his army, a lot. The idea is to be at par with the US Army. I can understand that. But once you have this super army, what will you do? Do you think that having that super army, I will remain quiet and don't move? Not at all. China will be tempted, let's say, to use the army, especially because the army, the military people, sociologically, will have more say in the Chinese political life. So I understand that concept of Tianxia, but what I see is that there is no future, uh, uh, let's say in the next 20 years, whereby China will accept to let the collective, the interest, take the lead over the Chinese interest. So that my on LinkedIn, you may have seen my text. I say China is already a superpower, but what lacks to that superpower to become a real superpower is the lack of capability to be an hegemon. Hegemon. China knows very well what is an hegemon. There is a wonderful book by the best historian of China, Sim Tian, about the history of the five hegemon. The five hegemon that long time ago, it was in the third and fourth century before our era. And that book explained and analyzed the why this hegemon won over the others, and especially the military aspect of that competition between the five hegemon. The military aspect took the lead, or were the most important asset to explain the victory of the hegemon. And I'm afraid that China will have this in mind. And I can understand, because who is in front of China? The Western world believe only on military action. Even Europe, as you have seen, Europe is now spending so much for the military investment. I can understand Russia is in front, okay, but I don't believe this is the main reason. The main reason is that the Western identity, culture, is a culture of violence, of physical rivalry, of war. If you look at the history of Europe, there is no room for non-violence. The Gandhi approach is okay for India and some other countries in the world, but the Western culture is about violence, is about force, being the most well equipped in military, etc., etc. So China will not be cannot be alone following that specific path of Tianxia, living under the same roof and trying to find harmonious solution. So, nevertheless, being the challenger, China cannot use the US big stick approach, because once he will do that, he will lose all the credibility he has built up for the last 30 to 40 years. Now, we have to use as much as possible that window of opportunity to work with the Chinese, and especially this concept of Tianxia, having the same and having the same interest in the future, and try to build up institutions who will be stronger. So United Nations is one field for geopolitics, but also we have institutions in research, in technology, etc., etc. So let us try to develop as much as possible multilateral institution, and get into that institution China, if possible with India, because India is also very large power. Africa, because demographic power rising today is Africa, and Europe being also active in that club, the US will be marginalized, and we will probably find a better future for our world.
Thank you so much for your insights. Very, very big way to think about it now.
Well, thank you very much, yes, for your view. And it was lovely for us to have you um on our channel, and we hope everyone had a good time listening to the professor speaking, and thank you everyone.
Good
you so
future
much.
for your European Guanxi. As you have understood, I'm betting on your generation to help create a world of much more balanced and pacific and prosperous. And China on that is one of the key partner for the new world. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Well, thank you everyone. Have a good day, and thank you to the professor.